Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fumble Sports NFL Weekly Show as we go through everything in the world of the NFL. And we have just a few weeks to go before the NFL draft. And so tonight's episode is a special edition as we do a mock draft of the first round. We're going to have our participants, our content contributors, take the role of GM for a number of teams, and we will go pick by pick, giving you our first round analysis so you can prepare whether it's for betting or for fandom for the NFL draft on April 27th. So settle in and enjoy what is going to be a lot of fun over the next hour. Want to make sure I welcome in our contributors. Of course, we start with Adam. You can check him out on Twitter at SpotterAJ. Adam, how are you doing this evening?
Doing real good. Hope you are as well. And I know we would be remiss if we didn't start it off before our mock draft tonight with the latest spicy rumor flying around, one Aaron Charles Rodgers. So I'm looking forward to getting to that.
There are plenty of rumors that we will get to before we get to our mock draft, including some spicy news out of New England and their quarterback, but we'll get to that in just a second. We also want to invite in Michael. You can check him out at Mike Dobbin, at Mike Dobbs 94. Sorry, Michael. I want to make sure I get your handle right. That's at Mike Dobbs 94. Michael, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, and no worries. I'm just excited to be back and getting ready to do this fantastic mock draft.
Yeah, excited for this mock draft. But before we get there, Adam, you kind of mentioned it before. What is the latest in the rumor mill that is the Aaron Rodgers news cycle?
So within the last hour or two, the new latest rumor is that the Packers have had and have been in talks with the San Francisco 49ers with the compensation of being San Francisco's 99th, 101st, and 102nd third-round pick this year and a 2024 first-round pick next year. Now, it's not – I don't know if the offer is ready to go, if they would accept it to ship him out there. But that's what the rumor mill has been, that if the Jets situation doesn't work out or San Francisco wants to press on, that would be the compensation they would receive in return.
And when I heard this, I leapt off of my chair because, first of all, how many quarterbacks can a team go through over a span of time, just churning through quarterbacks out there in San Francisco? But for years, there was talk about would there be that reunion, Aaron Rodgers coming from Northern California, obviously went to Cal, and would he come back? It seemed like Las Vegas was the farthest west he was going to go, but these rumors just came out of nowhere. Adam, what do you think the likelihood this actually happens? Or do you think this is actually the Packers finding a little bit more leverage to work on the Jets?
I think it's both. I think it's a little leverage to work on the Jets, and I think it's a backup plan that if this Jets deal can't get done, if Douglas, the GM there, just really wants to dig his heel in the ground and doesn't want to give up whatever the Packers are offering, whatever they're trying to work out, Rodgers can't come back to Green Bay, right? It can't happen. So he's got to go somewhere. So I think you absolutely have to listen to other teams to figure out a place for him to land in case this Jets deal does fall through.
Michael, what do you think about this? I know you're a fan of Washington, so you'd be happy to see him in the AFC as opposed to the NFC. But do you think that Aaron Rodgers is more likely to end up in San Francisco or in New York?
Yeah, I will say this in regards to also, you asked the question, how can teams just recycle through quarterbacks? I'll tell you how, and Washington's been doing it. It's not been great, but at the same time, you keep on going until you find the right quarterback. Obviously, that hasn't happened with Washington. San Francisco right now is in the middle of it. I think right now as well that the Packers are using this as leverage at the same time. Unless Aaron Rodgers himself comes out and says, I want to play for the 49ers right now, he wants to play for the Jets. And I think that this now is leverage for the Packers to now get better draft compensation for the trade.
I think it's a great move by the Packers to open up this other channel of communication and not make it a one-horse race, because I think that is the worst thing for them in terms of trying to get the most out of the Jets. I think for Aaron Rodgers, it's a win-win. Either the Jets or the 49ers are one quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender. And maybe if you're Rodgers, the 49ers job looks that much better because I think the NFC is weaker than the AFC. But for a number of reasons, The world continues to turn on the word of Aaron Rodgers and the latest around him. Adam, thank you for bringing us up to speed on that drama from Wisconsin. I do now have to shift to some drama towards my backyard a little bit in New England. Word came out over the last 24 hours that the Patriots have been shopping Mac Jones over the offseason. I don't think this is really breaking news. I think this is like, TV graphic, fake breaking news logo, simply because, yeah, I think the Patriots have been looking for other options this entire offseason. I think they were willing to move on from Mac Jones. I don't think they were married to him. I do think Belichick kind of set him up to fail with Matt Patricia last year, but I don't think that the Patriots, I think they would be interested in Lamar Jackson if the Ravens weren't having such a high ransom price for him. But I don't think the Patriots are in love with Mac Jones. I think they say all the right things when the cameras are rolling. But this news doesn't surprise me. Michael, again, we turn to you because someone in Washington understands kind of the backdoor dealings that may happen. Do you think Bill Belichick is trying to move him is actually a big deal, little deal, or no deal?
I think it's a little deal, and it really does depend on if he's just shopping to see what kind of compensation he can get in return. Because a lot of the times, players, you hear the news that they're being shopped around, but ultimately they aren't traded. It's just to see if they can garner any kind of compensation. And if I do think if Bill Belichick does get a package he likes, I think that he could trade him. But really, I don't really see this happening anytime soon, at least.
I can't even think of a handful of teams that would really want him. Someone I spoke to earlier mentioned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That made sense to me. But then they mentioned the Houston Texans. And it's like if you have the opportunity to draft one of the young quarterbacks in this draft and have them on a rookie deal for 5 years, I don't see why you'd go after Mac Jones, who has 3 years left if you pick up the option, and then obviously is more expensive and doesn't have the kind of promise that some of these quarterbacks have, because you've seen them now at the NFL level. So for me, I think Mac Jones is absolutely on the trade block. I just don't know who would take him. Adam, I'll shift to you because this is an interesting one. Who would you rather have right now, Jordan Love or Mac Jones?
For me, I'd rather have Jordan Love, and the reason being is he's sat now for 3 years behind a perennial Hall of Famer. He's learned the system. He knows the offense in and out. It should be a plug-and-play situation. Obviously, he's not going to play to an MVP level. No one's expecting that right off the bat. But we saw it with Rodgers to Favre. We're hoping with Love to Rodgers that's sitting on the bench and learning everything, whether it's audibles, your receivers. He should have that offense inside and out learn. And I think that's a big one too. Plus, I think he's a little bit more dynamic than Mac Jones. Love can run and scramble and throw and makes the big plays, where Mac Jones is more of a pocket passer and not too much elusive out of the pocket. The one thing that I question here is I'm with you and Michael too. Is I'm not surprised that he's on the block. I'm with you. I'm not sure where he would go, but my question would be what would be the backup plan? I mean, Bailey Zappi obviously isn't the answer at quarterback, so I'd be curious to see if they did make a trade. Would it be for ammunition to move up in the draft to grab one of his quarterbacks this year? But does Belichick going to start a rookie quarterback right off the bat again to learn a whole new system? I'd be curious to see what if he did get traded, what the plan would be at quarterback in New England.
No, it's a great point, because if you're acquiring the draft capital to then move up, then you're starting from scratch. And if you are drafting an Anthony Richardson or a Hendon, maybe that's kind of a building project. Again, that's another 2 years, and it doesn't feel like Belichick has that amount of leeway in New England anymore. He doesn't have that much rope to deal with. So I don't think he can have a complete rebuild going through the draft. If you're acquiring that draft capital to then go after Lamar Jackson, I totally understand it. I just think that's a lot of horse trading to try to ultimately end up with Lamar Jackson. Blease, what you got for us?
Yeah, that was my question. Do you think it gives more credence to that Lamar Jackson and then DeAndre Hopkins, bringing him in and like pairing that up? Just seeing like what the possibility of that could be.
You led us right into what our next topic it was going to be, which is DeAndre Hopkins. And I do think if Belichick was going to move on from Mac Jones in a trade, I do think Lamar Jackson, that would be the ultimate move to get. And I think Belichick would be the kind of guy to go try and pull that off. And then to your point, Blease, double down on it. I think DeAndre Hopkins and Belichick, I think they have a love affair between the two of them. I think Belichick has that with certain players, Chad Ochocinco Ed Reed. There's certain players that Belichick covets, wishes he always had on his roster. DeAndre Hopkins is certainly one of them. The question for me is, will DeAndre Hopkins go for less money to go play on a Chiefs, or will he take what the Patriots can offer, which is more money? But I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to end up being a Patriot no matter what. Blease, what do you think? Do you think DeAndre Hopkins ends up in New England, goes to Baltimore? Where do you think he ends up?
I do think Hopkins is coming, and I would love to see Lamar Jackson go there as well. I think that duo with that defense, I think would be really, really good in the AFC East next year.
I agree. And I think Baltimore needs to go make a move for for DeAndre Hopkins because they need to get more explosive. But that doesn't mean they don't need to address it in the draft. And that is where our focus shifts now. If you are just joining the show, welcome into the Butt Fumble Sports first round mock draft, only a couple weeks away from the NFL draft on Thursday, April 27th. So we are going to go through every pick of this first round. We did this a couple weeks ago, but we did it by consensus. Tonight, each guy is going to participate in the draft, and they will select for that team in the role of GM. So, Adam, you have your teams. Michael, you have yours. I have mine. We're going to go through each team, each pick, and that's going to force our hand. We haven't talked to each other. There's been no negotiating up until this point. So this is a completely organic experience for our general managers. Michael, we start with you. You are the Carolina Panthers, and you are on the clock. What is your selection?
With the first overall pick in the 2023 NFL mock draft, the Carolina Panthers select C.J. Stroud out of Ohio State, quarterback.
Interesting. And why did you go with C.J. Stroud, Frank Reich?
Because Carolina needs a lot of help, but their biggest hole is the quarterback position. I know they got Dalton, but at the same time, you need a new cornerstone for that franchise. And C.J. Stroud, I believe, is the best quarterback available. And I think you got to take who is the best available, and that's C.J. Stroud.
And with that, C.J. Stroud is the first quarterback and the first player selected in our mock draft. That puts the Houston Texans on the clock. I step into the role of general manager for this one, and Nick Caserio. The Texans have 2 picks in this first round, but there's no doubt where the Houston Texans should go with their first pick. They're going quarterback. And since C.J. Stroud is off the board, that makes the choice a little bit easier. With the number 2 overall pick in the Butt Fumble Sports NFL mock draft, the Houston Texans are going to be selecting Bryce Young out of Alabama. He is the franchise quarterback that this team needs. He has actually, I think, a lot of skills that are similar to Deshaun Watson, just smaller body, but elusive in the pocket, good arm, incredibly accurate. I think Bryce Young is probably more accurate than Deshaun Watson was, maybe not as athletic. But that said, Bryce Young will be the quarterback of the Houston Texans. That's where we're going. So 2 quarterbacks go in the first 2 picks. Number 3 is Arizona. That's you, Adam. Where are you going with your pick?
So with the loss of J.J. Watt this year and the struggles in the Arizona defense and edge rusher is much needed, and Will Anderson Jr. of Alabama is a selection here for Arizona. And just an interesting side note, the odds for the third overall pick was a heavy favorite to Will Anderson. And just recently, within the last day or two, Anthony Richardson is now a minus 165, and Will Anderson is a plus 430 for the number 3 overall pick. So just something to think about there.
Interesting. Clearly, the rumors of a team moving up into that number 3 pick are growing ever stronger. But for the purposes of our mock draft, the Cardinals have selected Will Anderson, that being the first defensive player to come off the board. For those out there who like to bet on the NFL draft, keep that in mind. Will Anderson, the strong favorite to be the first defensive player off the board. We have it here in our mock draft. The next pick, number 4, is to Michael, who is the Indianapolis Colts. We won't ask you to do a Jim Irsay impression. We'll just ask you to make a pick for him. Michael, where are you going with it?
Once again, quarterback needy team, and it's between the next 2, between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, but I think Jim Irsay's guy is Will Levis out of Kentucky. I just think that he fits Jim Irsay's QB mold of what he's looking for in a QB. Big, strong arm, downfield passer. They are going to need more help in the receiving core, but at the same time, you do also need to get your quarterback.
There you go. The third quarterback taken in the draft goes at number 4 to the Indianapolis Colts. That puts the Seattle Seahawks on the clock. That's you, Adam, at number 5. Where should Pete Carroll be going at number 5?
So at number 5 is another edge rusher. I know Seattle needs offensive line help, but their defensive line help needs a little bit more secure too. So it's really hard to pass on Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech in this spot. He's a playmaker. He can be a disruptor, and I really think he could step in, plug and play from day one to help that Seattle defense.
You continue to pound the drum for Tyree Wilson. He keeps falling in these mock drafts that we're doing to the Seattle Seahawks. Interesting what he could offer to that defense. That puts the Detroit Lions on the clock at number 6. I am in the role of Dan Campbell here, eating some kneecaps or biting some kneecaps. The Detroit Lions, they need to get better in the trenches. I loved what Aiden Hutchinson did last year, but they're going to get even better if I pair Aiden Hutchinson with Jalen Carter. The fact that Carter falls to number 6, I love it. I know there are some defensive backs that probably would fit well in this Lions secondary, but I think the defensive back position is deep enough where I can wait until later in the draft. I have that pick at number 18 as well. So for this pick at number 6, the Detroit Lions will be selecting Jalen Carter out of Georgia. Second defensive player taken so far, again, or third player rather, as we've had Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, and now Jalen Carter coming off the board. So 3 quarterbacks, 3 defensive players. That puts the Las Vegas Raiders on the clock at number 7. Michael, you're in the role of the Las Vegas Raiders. I've recently seen that Mark Davis changed his haircut. That should have been breaking news. Didn't see that on SportsCenter, but big news nonetheless. The bowl cut is gone. Michael, where do you think Mark Davis should go, not just with his new haircut, but with his draft pick?
So I just feel like that I'm just getting all the QBs picked in this mock draft so far because I have Anthony Richardson going to the Raiders because I know they just signed Jimmy G to a nice contract, but at the same time, you don't know what you're going to get with Jimmy G's health, as we've always alluded to in the past that Jimmy G's leg is like a glass house. So you need to get Anthony Richardson in this position to help just in case Jimmy G goes down and start the future a little bit sooner.
Love it. And yeah, you have been the number 1 quarterback drafter so far in our mock draft. Nice to see that Anthony Richardson found a home. If there aren't going to be trades, Las Vegas would be a really good fit for him. He could learn behind Jimmy G and obviously have Josh McDaniels, who has a history of working with quarterbacks, developing them. Would be nice to pair him with Josh McDaniels for a year of development. That now puts the Atlanta Falcons on the clock at number 8. Adam, you're in the role of the Atlanta Falcons. What do you think they should do? They have a number of needs. Do you think that Desmond Ridder needs a wide receiver? Are you going defense? Where's the pick?
Well, I think Atlanta addressed a few needs on defense, which they absolutely need in free agency. And it sounds like they are committed to Desmond Ridder. And if you're going to commit to a young quarterback, you need to have a big playmaker on the outside for him. So this wide receiver crop between Igigba and Johnston is kind of debated on who is the number 1 wide receiver off the board. But I'm a fan of Johnston. I think at TCU, he's a big-time playmaker. He has the stamina to withstand a high-powered passing attack. And I think that you bring him into Atlanta to give him Desmond Ridder the chance to be the number 1-2 combination that they need. So Quentin Johnston, wide receiver, TCU to the Falcons.
Bold pick there from Adam. For those who are keeping track for player prop bets, the first wide receiver taken in the mock draft. That puts the Chicago Bears on the clock at number 9. I will be drafting as the Chicago Bears. A lot of positions I could go with here. It's kind of tough for me because there are 2 Illinois kids that really stand out to me. Devin Witherspoon at cornerback and Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern at tackle. 2 positions that the Bears need. But for me, I think I got to go with the offensive lineman first. Protecting Justin Fields is the most important thing right now for the Chicago Bears. They're committed to him. They've gotten a wide receiver now in more in that trade with Carolina Panthers. So it's now about protecting their star asset in Justin Fields and allowing him to get the ball downfield to DJ Moore. So Peter Skoronski will be the pick here at number 9 for the Chicago Bears. That puts the Philadelphia Eagles on the clock at number 10. Michael, that's you. Where do you have the Eagles going?
So I could see the Eagles going in a lot of different positions, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, but I actually have them going with a riser in a lot of drafts that I've been seeing is Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa Edge. He could play on the inside, he could play on the outside. The Eagles are going to need to revamp that defensive line because they just signed Graham and Cox to only a one-year deal, so they're going to need to look for the future on that line. So I think that Lucas Van Ness is going to be a great fit for them.
Love that pick. Love that call. Would fit in really well with the Philadelphia Eagles. Adam, you now serve as the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, picking at number 11. There's a lot of rumors that the Titans are going to try and trade up to go chase a quarterback. We haven't done that in our mock draft. We're just playing it out as it currently stands with them picking at number 11. So, given that they're going to be staying there, Adam, where do you have the Tennessee Titans going with their first-round pick?
Well, Tennessee needs a little help kind of all over the place. They secured a little bit of defense in free agency. Wide receiver and offensive line are kind of places to look right now. And I think because of the loss of the wide receivers last year and needing to bring some kind of playmaker in there, no matter what quarterback it is, it's hard to pass up Jackson Smith and Jigba at Ohio State when he's still on the board here at 11. So I think you bring him in as your playmaker on offense, no matter who you have under center at quarterback.
Interesting that Michael was the one who was loving taking quarterbacks. You fall in love with taking wide receivers. That's the second wide receiver off the board. Adam's taken both of them. This time he's giving them to the Tennessee Titans, filling in some of that role that they lost when they traded A.J. Brown and really didn't replace last year. That moves the Houston Texans to on the clock at number 12. We played their role earlier, and I had them draft Bryce Young at number 2. Now at number 12, have a number of options here. Wide receiver, look for the offensive line, look towards the defensive line. A lot of positions I could consider here, but for me, I'm still trying to think of where can they kind of build, and I think it's still on the offensive line. So this might be a bit of a reach for some people, but I like them trying to make a move and going after the offensive tackle. I think they could put him over at the right tackle position. That will be Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State. I think that they need to protect Bryce Young. I think they continue to build the offensive line. I think the Texans are going to focus on offense in the first round. I think there's enough talent at other positions on defense to address it later. So Paris Johnson Jr. is the pick I'm making for the Houston Texans at number 12. That moves the New York Giants to on the clock. Michael, that's you. We're still assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a New York Jet in a couple weeks. Based off of that, where do you have New York going?
With the Jets, I see them only addressing the offensive tackle in the first draft, in the first round. Paris Johnson Jr. would have been my pick, but with him being gone, I think that the Jets are going to take Osiris Torrance out of Florida.
Wow, interesting pick. Why did you go there as opposed to Broderick Jones?
I think that I've just been seeing a lot of Osiris, his names being as a really late riser in a lot of drafts. He's just a solid interior blocker that can help just protect for if he does go to the Jets, Aaron Rodgers and Hall when he comes back from a recovery.
Wow, really interesting. We've had a bit of a run on offensive tackle, on offensive linemen here. And it kind of was started. I took Paris Johnson for the Texans in part because I thought that given that offensive linemen are going to be coveted, the Jets are going to be in that position, would be a good move for them. So part of the reason I jumped on it. That moves the New England Patriots to on the clock at number 14. I'm playing the role of Bill Belichick in this one. And if I'm Belichick, this is the kind of draft that I want happening in the first 13 picks ahead of me. A lot of quarterbacks and a lot of positions that even though I might need, I can probably get later on in the draft, or I can feel okay addressing other positions. For me, it's all about who do I like more, Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez, because cornerback is definitely a position of need. Personally, I fell in love with Christian Gonzalez. I'm sure Bill Belichick is way smarter about the defensive back position than anybody else on the planet, so he may like Witherspoon more. But if he saw what I did in the combine and at the pro days, Christian Gonzalez is my man. So at number 14, I have the New England Patriots drafting Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. That puts number 15, Green Bay, on the clock. Of course, we have our resident cheesehead to make sense of things. Adam, where do you have the Packers going at 15?
Real quick, I dropped out on you. Could you give me the 12 and 13 and 14 pick again? I missed my internet dropped on you.
Yeah, of course. I'd be happy to refresh your memory. And for all those listening out there, here are the last few picks that are made. We'll actually start with number 10 and work our way. So at number 10, the Eagles took Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. At number 11, the Tennessee Titans took Jackson Smith-Njigba. At number 12, the Houston Texans took offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr. At number 13, the Jets went with Osiris Torrance out of Florida, the offensive lineman. And number 14, the New England Patriots went with cornerback Christian Gonzalez. That refreshes everyone's memory. Adam, where do you have the Green Bay Packers going, given their position at number 15?
So I think they go tight end here. And originally, Michael Mayer, I believe, was the pick. But Dalton Kincaid has actually been moving up the draft board and has done a really nice job. And I think he might be a slightly better fit for the Packers. So I think as these young wide receivers between Dobbs and Watson, with a potential young quarterback with Love, when the Rodgers situation gets sorted out, the one thing they haven't had in a long time has been a good, solid tight end. So I'm actually going to take Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah, with the 15th pick.
Love that pick. And you were banging on the drum saying that the Green Bay Packers were going to focus on the tight end position. Those who are loyal listeners of the show, you know that Adam's been on that the whole time. Every time I now see a mock draft on ESPN, it's the tight end position. Adam, you've been saying it first in my mind. So I expect Kincaid or Mayer, one of the two. Interesting that you went Kincaid. I've been hearing some comparisons to Travis Kelce and that how he kind of runs routes and his versatility. So a lot of options you can get out of Dalton Kincaid in that offense. Certainly Jordan Love would benefit from having him on his offense. We now move to number 16, the Washington Commanders. Again, we've had a bit of a run on fans representing their teams. Michael, you make a 3 for 3 on this one. Where do you have Washington going?
Yeah, so as I alluded to in the past, Washington has a bunch of needs, in my opinion, one of the position needy teams in the league. And as everyone knows, I have a huge man crush on Joey Porter, but right now Devin Witherspoon is available, and I didn't think he would have been available at this far down in the draft. So I think that Washington is going to go with the best cornerback available, and that right now is Devin Witherspoon. In my opinion, he's the number one cornerback. He has far superior, the best tape out of any of the quarterbacks. That's why he didn't, in my opinion, really needed a test in Indy. He just really needs to just improve on his penalties. Other than that, I think he's a stud.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely is a stud. And I also commend you on making that pick, because if he falls that far, how can Washington not make that move? I feel like it's a no-brainer. I'm right there with you, Michael. So Devin Witherspoon is selected in our mock draft at number 16 to Washington, and right ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I'm sure were thinking Devin Witherspoon. But there are still a couple other great defensive options out there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Adam, we have you representing the Steelers in our mock draft. Where do you have Pittsburgh going with this pick?
Boy, it's really hard right now because you need a tackle to protect Kenny Pickett, but you also need help in the secondary. So you have 2 tackles on the board right now and a dynamic cornerback in Joey Porter Jr., but I think you have to go offensive lineman to protect your young quarterback. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will end up going with Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma over Broderick Jones just because he has a little more experience to try to shore up that offensive line for their young quarterback.
This is the most surprising pick so far in this mock draft to me. I was sure you were going to say Joey Porter Jr. Like, how could Mike Tomlin, if Joey Porter Jr. is on the board, how can he pass on him? Adam, I ask you, how could Mike Tomlin possibly pass on Joey Porter Jr.?
I know it's a tough choice, but cornerbacks, I think you can draft a little bit later on in the draft, but I think you need a tackle to protect your young quarterback and kind of have the anchor of the offensive line. Like I said, I could see them going either way here, and it'd be very, very hard to pass up on Joey Porter Jr. I just think that if Kenny Pickett is their guy and they think they can win with him, you have to protect him at all costs and worry about the secondary later on in the draft.
Well, that puts the Detroit Lions on the clock at number 18. And if this mock draft, if the real draft plays out like this mock draft, the Detroit Lions are one dangerous team, because in our first pick at number 6, we had them getting Jalen Carter after he fell a little bit. And now I get to have the Detroit Lions selecting Joey Porter Jr. at number 18. That means this defense gets way better overnight with 2 young defensive, very physical players who are going to be around for 4 years. Dan Campbell could all of a sudden have an NFC contender on his hands if this draft goes the way we have it predicted. Joey Porter Jr. at 18 is a steal to me for the Lions. Love that pick. That moves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock at number 19. Michael, you're in the role of the Bucs. No Tom Brady, obviously. Lots of needs for them. Where do you have them going?
Yeah, exactly. There are lots of needs for Tampa Bay, but I do think that they're going to address their offensive line because they were just riddled with injuries and they lost Shaq Mason, and I think they just need to fortify the trenches again, and I think that they're going to draft the best available tackle in Broderick Jones.
Wow, a run on offensive linemen, which isn't shocking me right now, only in that this isn't the deepest offensive lineman class. So I feel like the really good ones you have to go after, not assuming that you're going to be able to pick off some additional talent in rounds 3, 4, and 5. So if your guy's there, you might want to make a move and think, I can get a defensive back later. I can get a tight end later on, a couple other positions that are a bit deeper. So we've had a bit of a run in this middle group. Again, to remind some of you of what the last few picks have been, at number 15, the Green Bay Packers took Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah. At number 16, we have the Commanders taking Devin Witherspoon, who fell to them. Great pick. At number 17, the Pittsburgh Steelers go with an offensive lineman at Anton Harrison. At number 18, Joey Porter Jr. finds a home with the Detroit Lions. And number 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go with offensive lineman Broderick Jones. That puts number 20, the Seattle Seahawks, on the clock. Adam, you're responsible for drafting for the Seahawks. Where do you have them going after you had them selecting Tyree Wilson at number 5 earlier in this first round?
Well, since Osiris Torrance is off the board, an interior lineman, that's really what Seattle needs right now. And I think there's a big drop-off behind him. I don't think there's another first-round interior lineman on the board here. So I think they're going to have to go defensive line. And if Kalijah Kancey is still on the board from Pittsburgh, I think you need to take him with this pick to shore up that defense, and then you can worry about interior linemen later on in the draft. I just don't see one that has a high enough grade in this slot here. So I think you keep shoring up the defensive line, and Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh would be the pick.
Really interesting how you've now managed the Seahawks draft, because both of the picks are on the defensive line. That could become a really good unit really quickly with Tyree Wilson and Kalijah Kancey both joining the Seahawks if our mock draft comes to fruition. At number 21, the Los Angeles Chargers are now on the board, and I am responsible for the Chargers. This is a bit of a tough one for me. Number of positions that they have a need: wide receiver, linebacker, and cornerback. I'm going to start with the cornerback position. It's tough for me because there are 2 players I really like for them here, and they're both kind of situated right at this pivot point. One is Deonte Banks, really big fan of him out of Maryland. I love his combine, love his tape. Probably like him a bit more than the Chargers actually do. The other player that I have on my board for them is Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers would be a great selection for them. Contributes to the options that they have at wide receiver. That's where I'm going to go, actually. I'm going to go with Zay Flowers at the wide receiver position. Maybe a bit of a reach here, but part of the reason I'm going to do it is because the Baltimore Ravens are selecting at 22. So if I'm the Los Angeles Chargers and I do want a wide receiver, given that 2 are already off the board in our mock draft, I want to make sure I get to claim my guy rather than having to wait on who kind of falls through the shuffle. So I'll take my wide receiver ahead of time, and I will take Zay Flowers if I am the Los Angeles Chargers. That puts the Ravens on the clock at number 22. Michael, you're responsible for the Ravens. I took one wide receiver. Do you have your eyes on another one?
I actually don't have my eyes on a receiver for the Ravens. I know that could be a tricky pick with you don't know about the whole Lamar Jackson situation, but I do have the Ravens filling a need on the defense. I didn't think he would be available this late in the draft, but I think, as I've mentioned in the past, a match made in heaven situation would be Nolan Smith to the Baltimore Ravens. I just think that he is a Raven personified, just with the grittiness of the defense. I think he would be an ultimate steal if he was in this position for them. So I have him going there.
Love that pick when you made it a couple weeks ago. Love that pick now. I think your analysis is dead on. We'll now shift to number 23, the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of rumors that the Vikings are actually looking at quarterbacks, thinking of options beyond Kirk Cousins in years to come. Not sure if this is where you're going to go with it, Adam, but you're responsible for your rival Minnesota Vikings. Will you be kind to them, or will you try and trip them up is the question. Hopefully you'll take it on the serious, but where are you going with this pick with the Minnesota Vikings?
Unfortunately, I will take it on the serious because I could throw a garbage player in here, but I'll play it for intents and purposes. Obviously, we know Minnesota looking at a quarterback to me would just be completely insane here. That defense is atrocious. We talked about it all the time. Just a sieve, giving up points, yards at will. So need to start with the secondary. Their pass defense is atrocious. You have two players on the board right now between Brian Branch and Deonte Banks that could fill a slot. But I think it's much easier to find a safety and harder to find a shutdown corner. So I think Deonte Banks from Maryland is the pick here to help that absolutely atrocious pass secondary in Minnesota.
Like that pick and hope that the Vikings go in that direction because your analysis is dead on. I heard this rumor watching SportsCenter earlier today, and I was shocked by it because why would you ever go for another offensive position where you already have the need filled when your defense was bottom 3 in the league last year? If you want to go chase the Super Bowl, don't try and get depth at quarterback. Go get some help at cornerback. That's where you need to make your move. That now moves the Jacksonville Jaguars to on the clock at number 24. I'll be drafting for the Jaguars, and I'm in a pretty good position here because I have a number of needs filled, including wide receiver now that Calvin Ridley is coming off suspension. So offensive line is where I'm thinking. Obviously, I could also go after the defensive back position as well. Brian Branch is sitting there. Brian Breesy is also there. Miles Murphy, I can get an edge rusher. I think because he falls into my lap, I'm going to go with Brian Branch at number 24. I'm going to get a safety, bring some physicality, obviously bring the intelligence from an Alabama, a Nick Saban coached defensive back. So at number 24, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Brian Branch. Given that Deonte Banks came off the board at number 23, I think the Jaguars need to address that secondary, and they're starting to go a bit quickly. So if I'm Jacksonville, I make the move on it. That then puts the New York Giants on the clock. Michael, we're having a bit of a run on rival fans playing the role of GM. Again, hopefully you can see the Giants for what they are. Brian Daboll, what do you think they should do with this pick?
Yeah, I'd much rather do the pick of the Giants than the Cowboys. So I am going to also do this with the utmost profession. For the Giants, to me, it was cornerback, wide receiver. And with Brian Branch, the safety help off the board, I'd see them going more in the receiver. And I think the best available receiver is Jordan Addison out of USC. They need a threat to help Daniel Jones after they just signed him. Kenny Golladay, that experiment didn't work, so they're going to need a new number one true threat receiver. And I think Jordan Addison is the best available.
Love that pick. And there have been a couple of picks that we've had so far in this mock draft where I'm thinking, yeah, maybe that could happen. Jordan Addison of the Giants feels like one that really could happen. Love that pick by you. Feel like it's a strong play. We now do move to the Dallas Cowboys at number 26. Adam, you're responsible for Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones and making that pick for them. Where do you think they should go with number 26 overall?
Well, I think Jerry Jones is going to bring a hometown kid home, Bijan Robinson, to fill that need left by Ezekiel Elliott. But I don't think that's what they should do. They need defense on this team right now. And I know the running back position is going to be addressed, but I don't know in this day and age if you can value a running back unless he's absolutely dynamic this high in the draft, even though it is the back half of the first round. So there's two players on the board right now, interior defensive lineman and Brian Breesy. and Miles Murphy, the edge rusher from Clemson. Both Clemson kids, but I think you need to fill the interior defensive line to try to help stop the run of this defense. So I think Brian Bresee from Clemson is the pick here for Dallas.
By the way, I totally agree with you. I think he's the right pick. I don't know if Jerry Jones is going to be making the right pick. I feel like Bijan Robinson makes too much sense in some ways in that I feel like he will overreach, but I think Brian Bresee would make a lot of sense there at number 26. That puts the Buffalo Bills on the clock at number 27. They're in an interesting position. They both don't have a ton of needs, and yet at the same time, I feel like they do because that roster turnover could hit them hard in a year or two. Defensive back is a position, obviously, that a lot of people have talked about them looking at. A lot of the cornerbacks that I wanted to take for them are off the board. I don't see them reaching for Emmanuel Forbes, Tyreek Stevenson, a Cam Smith. That seems a bit too far for me. I also had the Bills kind of targeting wide receiver as well. That's not the same anymore because Josh Downs, again, feels like a bit of a reach. Nathaniel Dell, don't like that for them. That's way outside the first round. So it really comes down to the best available players on the board, and you start looking at guys like DeJuan Jones if I'm looking at offensive linemen. But if I'm going to be smart, I want to continue to get pressure. I feel like if the Bills had Von Miller, they may have been able to go to a Super Bowl last year. He wasn't healthy. So since Miles Murphy is still on the board, the Buffalo Bills with number 27 are going to take the best available player with Miles Murphy out of Clemson to bring some additional edge rushing pressure to that defense. That then puts the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock at number 28. Michael, that's your responsibility. Where do you have the Bengals going at 28?
I have the Bengals running in the card with Michael Mayer's name on it. I think that he would just be another threat to Joe Burrow. I think that receiving corps is going to be just fantastic. And I know he needs offensive line help, but I think he will make his life a lot easier when he gets a pass catching threat at the tight end position.
Especially after getting Orlando Brown and adding to that offensive line in free agency. I love that pick with Michael Mayer at tight end. Fits in perfectly with that offense. I believe they also signed Irv Smith at the wide receiver position, but you could draft another tight end just as easily. Feel like that would be a great selection for them. That then moves the New Orleans Saints to on the clock at number 29. Adam, this is going to be your pick. Where do you have the Saints going with this late first round pick?
So this is a tough one here because the Saints need a defensive line and also some help in the secondary. And you did talk about reaching for a cornerback at this spot. And I think the defensive line with Mozzie from Michigan, I think I'd rather find a cornerback. I think you could probably find interior defensive linemen a little bit further down the road here. So I actually have Cam Smith, the cornerback from South Carolina, a physical cornerback who can run a 4.40 40 slotting in here with New Orleans. And I think he can give them the help in the secondary that they need.
Okay, Cam Smith coming off the board at number 29. Only 2 picks left because the Miami Dolphins forfeit their first overall pick of this 2023 draft for trying to tamper with Tom Brady. How dare they? So instead, only 31 picks in this first round. We have 2 picks to go. Number 30 is the Philadelphia Eagles, the runners-up in the Super Bowl. Michael, this pick is your responsibility. Where do you have the Eagles going?
Yeah, with the Eagles, I had them addressing the defensive line earlier in the draft, and I still won't cancel it out that they would double down. But at the same time, they do need a receiver, but going with Josh Downs in this position to me still might seem like a little bit of a reach. So I am actually going to stay on the defensive line and go with Will McDonald out of Iowa State.
If they are able to get Lucas Van Ness and then turn around and get Will McDonald, that would be an incredible draft. The amount of pressure that they could bring, the rich just getting richer. Love that pick from them. And that only leaves the Kansas City Chiefs at number 31. Tough. A lot of options here, given that, again, Josh Downs, wide receiver, could offer some options. Mozzie Smith out of Michigan on the defensive line. But for me, if I'm the Chiefs, I just go offensive lineman. I get offensive lineman early. I don't care that maybe it's not as big a need as some other positions. I feel like, again, I can draft other positions later on. I feel like offensive linemen could go fast. And if I miss out on somebody that I may want, it'll disappoint me. There's a tackle who I'm still interested in, DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. May not be where Kansas City goes, but I think it's the smartest pick for them. So at number 31, we'll close out our first round mock draft with the Kansas City Chiefs selecting DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. That finishes the Butt Fumble Sports first round mock draft. Taking a quick look at the results, the first pick was C.J. Stroud to the Panthers, followed by Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Will Levis, and Tyree Wilson. Those were the first 5. Anthony Richardson went 7th to the Vegas Raiders. Lucas Van Ness went to the Eagles before Jackson Smith and Jigbo went to the Tennessee Titans. Christian Gonzalez went to the Patriots. Dalton Kincaid to the Packers. Devin Witherspoon to the Commanders. Zay Jones ended up going to the Chargers after Joey Porter, a few picks earlier, went to the Detroit Lions. We have the Giants going after Jordan Addison, and we have Miles Murphy going to the Buffalo Bills. Lots of picks that we made. Adam, what do you think of the results that we got? What were some of the picks that stood out to you as ones that could really happen?
Well, I think the top 3, with the exception of Arizona trading out of that spot, I think it's DJ Stroud and Bryce Young for sure. I know he's up the board. I'm just not sold on Will Levis. I think it'd be an absolute huge mistake if the Colts take Will Levis at quarterback. I think he needs to fall in this draft. And the fact that he would go over Anthony Richardson to me is crazy. I'm just not a big Will Levis fan by any means. But I think if you look down this list, Chicago needs to protect their franchise quarterback. So getting Skoronski at 9, I think is a smart play. I think in Jigba going to Tennessee can get that offensive outside presence that they lost with A.J. Brown. I think that's a solid play. For Washington, I think if Devin Witherspoon's available to shore up that defense in Washington, I think that's a great pick there. And in the back half of the first round of the draft, I think the Giants obviously need help with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. And I think Jordan Addison would be a great fit there. And then to round out the draft, I agree with you. I think much like the Bears trying to protect their franchise quarterback, I don't think Kansas City can stockpile offensive linemen enough. So I think DeJuan Jones there is a smart pick as well. So those are some of my thoughts on our mock draft.
Michael, where do you come out? What are some of the picks you really liked? And what were some picks in which you went, nah, I don't see that happening?
Yeah, as Adam said with the whole Will Levis situation is that I actually agree with him that I'm not sold on Will Levis. But the whole thing with Indianapolis Colts, Irsay, his quarterback's prototypical build is Will Levis. And that's the only reason why I have him going there is just because that's who I think Jim Irsay is going to want to be at the helm. But I do agree. I think Anthony Richardson to the Raiders would be a fantastic fit for not only the Raiders, but for him. If Jimmy G doesn't get injured, then you do have him to sit and learn and develop even his raw skills to be even better. I do love the Skoronski pick to Chicago. That just feels like a match made in heaven. To me, looking at all these names, there could be a bunch of steals in the later of the round with Addison, Breesy, Mayer, Cam Smith, all these players. To me, if they're available, and I think those picks could be a hit for a lot of these teams. And I think a lot of these teams are going to leave the first round with a big smile on their face. But I also see that I think looking at these names, I think the defense is going to come out on top after the first year of the rookie season. I think that you look at all these defensive names, I think that they're going to have a bigger impact for their teams than the offensive players, and that's including the quarterbacks.
Outstanding analysis, because I agree with you on most of what you said. I think offense is not going to shine in year one like the defense will. I think this defensive class is better. I also agree with you. I think there's some steals. I think that because quarterback is going to get some early love in the first 5 picks and maybe the first 7-8 picks. Obviously, you'll have a run on certain positions. I'm curious to know when there's going to be a run on wide receiver. Curious to know when there's going to be a run on offensive linemen. That means a number of guys are going to fall, like Nolan Smith, Brian Branch, Brian Breesy, Miles Murphy. These are the guys who, to your point, Michael, could be stars. In this mock draft, we had a couple guys falling that I didn't believe would get that far. It starts with Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, Joey Porter. All of those guys I had going sooner. But what's funny about our mock draft is I don't think it's that far off. I think some trades could happen that throw things around. But sooner or later, where are those guys going to get slotted if the offensive linemen, wide receivers, and quarterbacks that we suspect will go in the first 15 picks, there's just not that much room left. And so I think our mock draft was pretty dead on, again, if there is an additional trade movement. But I also think there are some steals to be had. I thought one of the better picks was Michael Mayer to the Cincinnati Bengals by you, Michael. Love that pick. Also liked your pick of Jordan Addison for the Giants. Those are two guys on the offensive side that I do think could have a really good rookie season. So great first round mock draft. Had a lot of fun doing it with you guys. Hope you enjoyed doing it. That's going to wrap up our show for the week. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, for all the latest NFL and sports content, as well as our YouTube channel, Butt Fumble Sports. You can also check us out on TikTok on Butt Fumble Sports, putting out content every single day, betting odds, rants, and of course, getting you ready for the NFL draft. We will be back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for our next NFL Weekly show. Until then, be safe, and of course, we'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers, Adam. But until then, be well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.